Hi everyone, welcome to this new video, and in this video we are going to talk about Flux and how we can set up GitOps with the help of Flux. So before actually deep diving into Flux, let's understand what GitOps is basically. So GitOps is basically a methodology using which we deploy our resources in the Kubernetes, right? And it basically means that Git is going to be a source of truth where all the changes related to the infrastructures will be kept, right? So assume that you have a Git repository which is acting as a source of truth, and everything that is there in the Git repository should be your actual cluster state. So that is what GitOps is, and it has certain principles. So there are basically four GitOps principle, and that every GitOps system should adhere to. So the first principle is declarative, which means that all the resources should be declared in a file, right? So which means that anything that you wish to deploy into your system, that should be declared, right? The second principle is versioned and immutable. Now, this means that any change that we want to apply to our applications or to the cluster, that should be versioned, right? And in case of Git, right, as a Git, because Git is a VCS version control system, all the changes that we store in the Git, they are automatic versions, which means if you want to upgrade or do any modification to the application, they're version by default, right? Because we can anytime go to the previous commit history, and then we can track the changes, what changes has been done in the past, right? And they are kind of immutable as well, because you can't mutate the commit hash, right? Instead, rather you will have to create a new commit, and with the new configuration changes that you wish to apply. The third principle is that pulled automatically, which means that all the changes that we want to apply to the system, right, they should be pulled automatically by some agent or some software, right? And when we are talking about Flux, in this case, Flux is the the tool that is going to pull those changes from the Git and then apply to the cluster. The fourth principle is continuous reconciliation by the agent, which means that that these system agents should be always reconciling the state what we have defined in the Git and what is the actual state in the cluster. So these agents or these tools, they're always going to continuously monitor what is the current state in the Git versus what is the actual state in the cluster, right? So they should always reconcile. So these are the four principles of GitOps. Now let's talk about how GitOps works. So in case of GitOps, we basically, it is made up of two words, Git plus operation, right? And in the GitOps methodology, we treat Git as a single source of truth for the systems, and all the configurations are stored in that source of truth, which is Git, right? And thus agents or these tools, they are continuously going to reconcile what we have in the Git versus what we have in the cluster. So basically, if you see the diagram as well, we have a Git repository and a Git agent. And in case of Flux, when we are going to use Flux for GitOps, that GitOps agent is going to be the Flux. So all the changes are going to be stored in the Git repository, right? And then that GitOps agent, in this case Flux, is going to always sync that Git repository to the cluster, which means that whatever you define or whatever changes that you made to the Git repository, all those YAML files, they should be applied automatically by the Flux in the cluster. Okay, now let's talk about Flux. So Flux is an open source GitOps tool, right? It's open source, built for Kubernetes, and it's a CNCF graduated project. And Flux is a set of controllers. So there are various controllers that are available in Flux, like source controller, notification controller, customized controller, Helm controller, and all of these controllers have their own specific purpose. So like source control is basically used for tracking of the changes in the source. It can be Git, it can be, Helm repository, it can be container registry, or it can be registry bucket as well, right? And then these controllers, or in this case, they are going to always reconcile what we have defined in the Git versus what we have actually in the cluster. Now, Flux exposes a set of composable APIs, which means that you can anytime use those composable APIs to, manage the resources for yourself in the cluster. Let's talk about the high-level architecture of the Flux. So if you see the diagram carefully, here we have the Kubernetes API server, right? And when we do the Flux bootstrap command, that Flux is kind of initialized in the cluster. All the set of controllers are created into the Kubernetes cluster. And one of the controller that I was talking previously is source controller, which is tracking various sources, whatever you define, right? Whatever Git repositories or S3 bucket or maybe, container S3, whatever you want to track, that can be defined via source controller. They are managed via source controller. And then there are other controls as well, like the Helm controller, notification controller, and then a customized controller. Now, these controllers are doing their tasks, right? And whenever there is a change, right, source controller tracks those changes and then, applies those to the Kubernetes cluster, right? And then there is a Helm controller as well, which is used for managing up the Helm releases if you want to deploy or manage Helm charts, right? Then the notification control is managed or is used for, sending up the notification in case if there is any failure to the various, notification providers. These are the core components, or these are rather the set of controls that I was talking about. The source controller, which is watching up your source repositories. It can be Git, Helm, container history, right? Or it can be any of those sources where we keep our configurations. Then the customized controller, which is used for applying up those YAMLs to the from the Git to the Kubernetes cluster. Then we have a Helm controller, which is managing up the Helm releases. So if you have deployed Helm charts in past, right, you know that there is a command Helm upgrade or Helm install, right? So same Helm releases are managed in GitOps via the Helm controller. Then there's a notification controller, which is used for sending up the notification to Slack or Teams, right? Whatever provider that you wish to configure. And then there is a image automation controller, which is used for tracking up the image updates. These are the container images. Let's say there is a image version update that happened and you want those changes to be applied to your application as well. You can consider using image automation controller, right? So now let's talk about the source controller. I think we have already talked about the source controller, but I'll just talk about one more time. So we can define all of the resources that we want to track via the help of CRDs, and Git repository CRD is the CRD using which we can define the Git repository that we want to track, right? Then anytime if there is a source control is constantly monitoring up those sources, and if anytime there is a change that is going to get applied to the cluster, and all those information are kept in these CRDs. Like for if you want to track any Git repository, you are going to create a Git repository CRD. If you want to track any Helm repository, right, you are going to create a Helm repository CRD, and similarly for a S3 bucket as well, right? This is how we define a Git uh, uh, repository CR, right? So the source is coming from the Flux. If you see the API version, this is coming from the Flux, and the kind is Git repository, and here you define the URL of the Git repository which you want to track, right? And the branch as well, right? Let's talk about Kustomize as well. So Kustomize is again going to play a vital role when we want to apply changes to the Kubernetes cluster, and source control is going to watch for those changes, but customized control is the one which is going to apply those changes to the Kubernetes cluster, right? And there is a customization CRD as well. Let's take a look at how it looks like. So again, the API version is coming from the Flux only, and the kind is customization. Let's talk about the spec part. So in the spec, the important part is the source ref, which means that which this is the part of, or this is linked to which Git repository or which source reference. So here I'm talking about Git repository with name pod info, and then which all locations or which all file locations it has to track. So that is defined here. So assume that you have a Git a repository with this particular URL, and you have a branch, right? And when I define the customize, right, a customize resource, I can say that okay, in the specified Git repository, which is this one, I want to track, or I want to automatically apply the changes whatever is defined in this folder, right? So this can be any folder, right? And anytime if you push any change to this folder, the Flux is going to apply those changes to the cluster, right? This is what simply this path means, right? Okay, so now let's go to the demo part, and in this demo we are going to install Flux. There are two ways to set up the Flux, and we are going to take a look of both of them, and then we are going to deploy application via Flux. So I'll go to my Git repository. So this is my GitHub repository. There is a repository called Flux GitOps. This is an empty repository, nothing here. And now let's go to the Kubernetes cluster. So I have a local Kubernetes cluster that is running via kind. So if I show you the pods, it's a local Kubernetes cluster, right? And let me delete this namespace Nginx as well. This was what I created for testing purpose. Okay, so namespace has been deleted. So it's a fresh cluster now. We can see all the pods. Now what I'm going to do, let me open that project repository as well. So here I mentioned the steps to install the Flux. So there are two methods like I mentioned. So one is the Flux bootstrap method. It's a very simple method. You just run this command and that is going to start Flux on your Kubernetes cluster. The other operation or the other method is slightly, it has more steps. Basically, you have to set up the authentication by yourself so that Flux can, watch your repositories, right? And let's use both of the methods, for now. So I'll go to my terminal and let me run this command Flux bootstrap. And here I am defining the owner, which is my username, which is ADITYA JOSHI 12, the repository, which where I want to keep all the changes, which is Flux GitOps in this case, the branch that I want to track, and the path, right? And this is the path where basically all the resources should, reside, and Flux is only going to watch this particular directory, right? So I'm going to execute this command. So this is asking me for my personal account token, which is pat. So let me go to Git. Let me quickly create a pat token so that you can easily do from settings. And then there is a section called developer settings. And from here, go to personal access token, classic token, generate new classic token. For now, let me give it a name as test. Keep it as expiry as 7 days. And let me just give it some permissions. These are not required. Okay, you can always fine tune the permission. For now, for this demo purpose, I'm giving all the permissions, but you can always fine tune it. So I got the token. I'll copy this token and I'll keep it here. So once I put the token, this is going to set up all the components for me in the Kubernetes cluster. So, and if we go to Git as well, if we see Git, again, let's go to the same repository. Here you can see that it automatically created these folders for us, right? And then there is a folder called Flux system where Flux keeps its own configuration, right? So if you go to this Flux GOTK component, here you can see that it has defined the deployment services, everything related to the Flux in this particular file, right? And this was the path that we gave when we want to, when we're bootstrapping up the Flux. Okay, so Flux is ready now. And if I just show you the namespace as well, here we can see that there is a namespace called Flux, right? Flux system, which is created 50 seconds ago. And now let's see what all pods we have in Flux system namespace. So here you can see all the 4 controllers are available, right? And if I go ahead and create a file or a deployment here, let's say an Nginx deployment, that is going to automatically get created for us, right? And let's do one more thing. So I wanted to talk about the customize and the Git repository CRD. Let's see that CRD as well. So these are the CRDs that were installed, and we are interested in the Git repository CRD. So kget, this is the CRD. This is in Flux system namespace. So there is a CRD called Flux system. Let's get the YAML out of it. Flux system, and we want the YAML format. So if you see this particular CRD, right here, the API version is the one that I showed in the presentation as well. The kind is Git repository. Now, the important thing that I wanted to show you here is the URL, right? So if you can see that this is the same URL, or this was the URL that was automatically constructed for us based on the parameter that we defined when we did the Flux bootstrap, right? And then the secret ref, this is the secret where our credentials are present that Flux uses in order to sync or track the repository. Let's see this secret as well. Yep, let's see the secret. So let's do kubectl get secret. In the Flux system namespace there is a secret, and the secret name is again Flux system. Let's do YAML as well. YAML. Let's see the content. So there is a identity, a public key basically, public key and the private key, right? And using which Git is able to Flux is able to authenticate to the Git repository, right? Okay. Now I'll delete this Flux. I can simply do using a Flux uninstall command, right? Using this command, I can simply delete the Flux from my cluster. Right. And now, we can go ahead and bootstrap the Flux manually as well. So again, if I go to Git repository, the files will be still there. Let me delete all of these folders. So I'll delete all the folders. And then we are going to bootstrap the Flux using the method where we are going to give the permissions, right? So here we can see this repository is empty again, and there is nothing related to the Flux. So if I go do Flux kget namespace, there we can see that there is no namespace related to the Flux, right? Okay, so now let's try to bootstrap Flux or install Flux using a different way. So first we have to create identities, right? The key pair, basically the public and the private key pair. So let me run this command. So it has generated a key pair in this location inside the temp directory, right? And there is a public and a private key that got generated for me, right? And these same credentials is what I'm going to use when I'm going to authenticate to the Git repository, right? Okay, now I can create a namespace, and if you see here, right, this is what exactly I'm going to do, right? So in the automated way or in the Flux bootstrap method, you were able to see that we had a secret called Flux system, and inside that there was a public key and the private key. So same is what I'm going to do here. I'm going to first create a namespace. This is going to be a Flux system namespace where I'm going to keep my secret. Let me copy that command again, or let me copy both the commands, and the secret name is going to be Flux auth in this case. So the namespace is created and the secret is also created. If I do k get secret in the Flux system namespace, we should be able to see a secret called Flux auth, right? Okay, so now we have to do one more thing. We have to upload this, secret or the public key to the GitHub so that, Git and Flux can authenticate with each other, right? So that we can do using at this particular location. So we have to go to GitHub, then repository settings, then deploy key, right? And we have to put the public key. So let me copy the public key here. I'll do cat. So it has given me this public key. Let me copy this public key. So this has copied, and now I'll go to settings, then deploy key, and I'll delete this one. So this was the one that was automatically created by Flux for us in the previous example. I delete this and I'll create a new key. Let me call this as Flux keys, for example, right? And I can put it here. Okay, so the deploy key is set. Now the key is set. Now I can simply do Flux bootstrap, right? So here you can see that I'm doing a Flux install hyphen export. Now what this is going to do, this is going to give me all the configuration that is going to get applied. So if I do Flux install hyphen export, this is going to print everything into the Flux side, which is that's going to get deployed, right? So what I'm going to do, I'm just pipe this to a file called Flux install. So everything will be stored in this file, and then I'm going to apply this file to the Kubernetes cluster using Kubernetes kubectl apply command, right? So once I do this, that should be done. And I have to modify one more thing, or let's verify it. Get pods in the Flux system is this. So all of them are ready. Let's see the logs of basically source controller. So it looks fine to me. Let's describe the pod as well once. We want to describe the source control pod. I'm just trying to ensure that the secret that we created, the authentication keys, are they rightly pointed to the Flux pod or not. Okay, it mostly looks fine to me, but we can anyway validate it once we start pushing up the things uh, to the cluster. And now we have to do one more thing. So once we install the Flux, we have to create these Git repositories and the customization by ourselves. So that is what I'm going to do. So I'll just simply copy the customization and the Git repository. So here you can see that this is the same Git repository. I have defined my secrets in this particular secret, with name Flux auth, and the branch is main. So I'll create this resource Git repository and the customization. Here you can see that this is pointing to the Git repository with name Flux system Git. This is the same Git repository, and then the folder on which Flux is going to monitor the changes. So that this is this particular location that we are going to create by ourselves, right? So I'll just copy this and I'll create a file here, uh, cr.yaml custom resources, and I'll put them here. Let's try to apply them. cr.yaml. Okay, so they both are created. And now what we can do, we can go to the Git repository and create a resource. And let's see whether that resource gets created to the cluster or not. So what I'm going to do, I already have an application here, application code. It's an Nginx application. We want to create a namespace that is with name Nginx, and a deployment in that namespace with name Nginx, right? So I'll copy this configuration, and what I'll do, I'll go to the Git repository. I'll add that file, and let's give the location. This was cluster/cluster1, I guess. It was clusters/cluster1, and I can give the file name as anything, whatever I want to give. So let me give this as nginx.yaml, and let me put everything here, right? So once I do this, within couple of seconds, we will be able to see that there is a new namespace that got created with name Nginx, and a deployment will also get created in that same namespace. And here we can see that it took couple of seconds, but Nginx namespace is here. And if I just see the pod in the Nginx namespace, we can see that we have two pods, right? Let's go ahead and let's try to do some modification. Let's try to make the replicas at 3, and let's see whether these changes are getting reflected or not. So what I'm going to do, just simply update the Git repository, the Git configuration that is defined in the Git, and within couple of seconds, the number of pods here should become 3, right? So it will take a couple of seconds, and after that, we should be able to see 3 instances here. And here we can see that now the number of replicas for the Nginx are 3, which means that these were automatically brought up by the Flux for us, right? Which means that Flux is always syncing up with that repository. Whatever changes that we define in that repository, they're going to get synced back to the cluster. So this was it for this video. Just a quick summarize what we discussed in this video. We talked about GitOps principle, what GitOps is, GitOps principle, and then we also saw the Flux architecture, the various Flux controllers, and then we also take a look on the quick demo, like how we can set up the Flux. And there were two methods. One is the Flux bootstrap, and the other one was the Flux install, where we have to set up the keys, the authentication keys by ourselves, right? And then we were able to, when we are able to bring up the Flux, we created a deployment in the Git repository, and that got synced automatically to the cluster. So hope you like this video, and if you did like this video, then please like and subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you in the next one.